Okay, we're back online. Thank you, Mauro, and we're very honored that you can actually join us today. And thank you for supporting the community, the Red Team Village, the DEF CON Red Team Village, as well as the Texas Cyber Summit. The floor is yours, so please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Omar, for inviting me, and good day to all. My name is Mauro, and I'm going to give my talk, COVID-1984, about propaganda and surveillance during a pandemic. Let's start. I'll make a brief introduction. I'm Mauro Eldritch, as I said before. I'm a cybersecurity architect, and I'm the founder of DC DEF CON Group Argentina, 5411. I spoke at some conferences before, and I worked for the government for the last, say, 9-10 years. And the objective of this talk is to summarize and to explain the political situation that is currently happening in Argentina, and that many of you may find particularly familiar to your countries. And this will be explained from a hacker's point of view, expecting OSINT, social engineering, and even reverse engineering somewhat. My talk is divided in 2 chapters. The propaganda, the first one, that talks about the Argentine pro-government propaganda apparatus on social networks, especially on Twitter and WhatsApp, and seen from within, because this talk focuses on implanting a sock puppet account inside this apparatus in order to study and review its internal operation, right? Expecting, as I said before, social engineering and OSINT. On the second one, for those who prefer the reverse engineering and the code review things, and the second chapter is about surveillance. On the Cuidar COVID-19 mobile application, you know that it's a sort of a trend that governments are creating tracking applications. Well, Argentina is not the exception. So with the particularity that this application was tried to be made mandatory by law, and obviously it encountered a great resistance. We'll try to dissect this application and uncover their various privacy issues, its bad practices on security, and a lot of material that you probably have seen before on the subreddit programming horror and the like. And just for the record, a little disclaimer, every item disclosed here is publicly available through open source intelligence. So there's no private information being leaked or being published. And obviously, I haven't been involved in any illegal activity directly or indirectly. Some people asked me before, is reverse engineering is legal in my jurisdiction in my country? And it is. So just for the record. Let's start with the first part, propaganda. I must clarify that I left everything as is in the original language. You know, in Argentina we speak Spanish, but everything is translated. So you won't have problems with things written in Spanish or something you can understand or can read. What is propaganda, you may ask? I think a lot of you already heard about this. Propaganda is a form of communication that is used to influence an audience and trying to install an agenda, right? Since the objective of propaganda is installing an agenda, sometimes, or most of the times, you might find yourself against alternative facts or lies, simply say lies. And you notice statements are not objective and maybe misleading. Agents of propaganda online are called trolls. You might have heard this term a lot of times before. They massively comment on social networks supporting certain movements or governments. They try to establish their own debates and their own trends and their own presence, right? And on the other hand, they also focus on diverting certain opposition debates and trends. They usually try leaving spam comments, fan cams, you know, those K-pop fan cams, any other material that makes this thread really, really hard to follow, really uncomfortable to follow. So legit users simply leave because it's really unbearable to stay there. Other of the objective is establishing negative trends against their oppositions, right? And they are also grouped into troll farms. And obviously they work together and they act like a swarm. They never come alone. How to recognize a trolls? It's something that might not always be exactly like this, but these are the categories in which they fall usually. You might see a profile with lots of default configurations, with no profile picture or a stock one, a fake one. And for example, on Twitter, you may see a lot of numbers in their handler because that's the default Twitter configuration. If your username is not available, it will create it and add a bunch of numbers. They share a common language. This is something that it's pretty interesting. And they obviously agree upon a common version to answer to certain events. For example, as I stated here, the president has offshore accounts. No, that's a media operation. And as I said before, they act like a swarm. They never come alone. You might probably find them in bunches. While many governments are credited with having online agents of propaganda, for example, in Russia, they have the Trolls of Olgino, China and the 50 Cent Party, North Korea and the UFD, Venezuela with the Armada Bolivariana de Trolls, and now Argentina. They have something called Tropa K, K-Troop, or Cyber K. It's not because they are a K-pop supporting fandom, but it's because they support the governments of both presidents Kirchner, Nestor Kirchner, and his wife, Cristina Kirchner. Let's keep going. Propaganda has advanced so much that there are social networks focused towards them. For example, against, you can find counter-social, where the countries with the highest propaganda incidents are totally blocked. For example, if you come from China, from Russia, Iran, North Korea, Syria, Pakistan, and some more, you won't be able to access counter-social. You're absolutely blocked. Even if you're not a troll, even if you're a normal person, you're directly left outside. And on the other hand, in Argentina, we have a supporting social network for propaganda and for, for political posting towards a single party. We have facepopular.net. It was a ripoff of Facebook. And it was built, even though it was a ripoff of Facebook, it was built having in mind that it should be against the establishment and imperialism. It was clear a support of the Peronist Party in Argentina. Only its militants participated actively, and it was supported by the Ministry of Culture, as you might see on this image. And then let's talk about trolls and censorship. Remember that the goal of a troll is not only to spread messages, but to avoid its competence, the opposition, to do so. He needs to silence other voices, not only to spread theirs. So lots of groups participate in something in something that is really negative for the internet, that it's massively reporting posts of accounts from opposition or from people that doesn't think the same as them. So they only want to appeal to a single voice. Argentina is an alien terrain for this kind of things because many times the government itself tried to control social networks or internet, as we'll see next. For example, a Peronist legislator proposed that users commenting on websites, forums, and the like identify themselves with their national identification number, which is like the social security number in the USA. So basically, it's your national identification. And they also wanted yourself to register with your home address too, which is pretty concerning. Another senator from the Peronism proposed also a public and democratic regulation of social networks. Obviously, Argentina has no power over platforms like Facebook or Twitter that are not residing here. And also the government published a cyber patrolling protocol and promoted it in order to cyber patrolling the social media posts. This came up with something really negative too, as we can see in this post by the Digital Rights Defense Network, arrested for tweeting. A real user of Twitter, identified with his name and surname and all his personal data, was detained, arrested, for publishing something that wasn't, that the government didn't like it, basically. But the activity of trolls continues to grow. So I decided that it should be worth trying to track them, to track their activity. When you browse pro-government hashtags, you find two kinds of users. The real ones, because the government has real supporters, right? And trolls or bots. So this is a mixed-up apparatus, in my opinion. There were many rumors on Twitter that indicated that some users received invitations, DMs, direct messages, asking them to join the apparatus. Mostly users that were not happy with Macri's presidents, so they tweeted something against, but that didn't mean that they were actually supporters of the current government. My goal was to get that kind of invitation. You know, for me, it is like the golden ticket from the chocolate factory. So I created a sock puppet account and I tried to mimic the behavior of those users who spread propaganda. It took almost a month of observation, of silent observation, trying to mimic them. And I came up with a sock puppet that was pretty much like their users. The profile photo was President Fernandez and Vice President Fernandez together. The cover photo was Vice President Fernandez giving a speech at Vélez Stadium. I was trying to follow the president, some ministers, and a few real pro-government accounts. On my description and tweets, I tried imitating their specific language and symbolism. And you might ask, how? How did you manage to learn their language? Well, I was trying to use the Twitter API to monitor their hashtags and extract those most repeated terms. And I came up with this cloud of words, and most of them are pejorative terms to refer to opponents. For example, gorillas. Now that we were speaking the same language, I was really excited to getting my invitation. On just a few hours, my sock puppet raised 100 or more followers. Just for the record, my real account, my real Twitter account, has only 200 followers since 2015. Most of these users were trolls, and a few were real users too that followed me back. I started to retweet official accounts, obviously these real users too. I tried answering them some messages. I jumped in on their hashtags and tried to tweet them too. And after only 3 days of activity, I received my invitation, my golden ticket. A user will call DC send me the following conversation. Give me a second. Hey buddy, we are making Twitter groups to install hashtags. You wanna join? And I was like, hey buddy, sure. What am I supposed to do? Basically, you have to tweet the hashtags that we've sent to the group. Then, immediately, I was added to a group number 300 and something more, let's say 300. A group called Soldiers of the National Project, containing 50 people. And then one of the first messages was this. Hey guys, Ariel Garbars is asking us to use Larreta is responsible. I'll explain this hashtag. Larreta is the mayor of Buenos Aires City, and it's a member of the opposition. They wanted to make him responsible of something that was happening at that exact moment. And now you may ask, who is Ariel Garbars, by the way? Okay, at this point, I didn't know who he was. Once you see the trends of that given day, Larreta is responsible, made it to the top 5 trends. Actually, it stood on 4th place. The second trend is also a fabricated one. As you may see, this is taken from getdaytrends.com. But if you ask Trendinalia, it will give you a really similar version of what I said before, but one of the trends became 3rd place. And as you can see, at least they lasted for 12 hours straight. As you may see, the number 3 lasted for 13 hours and a half almost. And the number 4, Larreta is responsible, lasted for at least 13 hours. This teaches us that propaganda interventions can be highly toxic. Again, I received another message from the group, right? With Ariel Garbars, again, we formed a group where he's the administrator and tells us what to publish and at what time, so we can get our trend to always be on 1st place. Again, who on earth is Ariel Garbars? Okay, do you remember the first guy who sent me an invitation, DC? Just 10 days later, another account from him tried to recruit me again, and it went with the very same script he used before. Hey, buddy, we're making Twitter groups to install hashtags. You want to join? Hey, buddy, sure, go ahead. Okay, I'm adding you. And I was added again to another group. Again, let's say number 305, for example. Again, titled Soldiers of the National Project. Now, by accident, I was a member of 2 propaganda groups. I noted that there was a 6-digit difference between each one. For example, the first one I joined was the 301, and the second the 307. Each group can have 50 users at most, so 49 if you do not take into account administrator. 49 users multiplied by 6 new groups gives us a total of 294 users. In 10 days, the apparatus increases its power by almost 300 users, and that's a lot. And according to the latest group ID I managed to discover, I don't know exactly about, at that time, right? It was the last one I managed to discover. There were at least 350 propaganda groups. So if we multiply that by 49 users, we have 17,150 propaganda users. A WhatsApp group was shared on both groups among the hashtags. And upon joining, this happened. City number 7. As we can see in its name, there were 7 WhatsApp groups at least, and they had 255 users, if you do not take into account the administrator. That gives us around 2,000 new users. And if we sum them with the Twitter ones, we have around 20K users. But note here, I must say the truth, there might be repeated users there. For example, I was one of the repeated users, being both on WhatsApp and Twitter. The group, as you can see below its name, had members from the USA, Spain, and even Germany, as you can see from their country codes. Upon joining, the administrator sent us some hashtags, some instructions, and it goes like, okay, at 7:30, we come out with $buitre. It was basically a rant against people buying dollars. You know, in Argentina, we can buy dollars, it's restricted. We can only use our current currency. That administrator that sent this message was Ariel Garbars. That name definitely rings a bell now, right? So, for closing this chapter, lie machines. Who is Ariel Garbars then? You have heard of him like 3-4 times now. He's the CEO of Protección Digital, Digital Protection, a company which was favored with many contracts by our federal justice and various Argentine governments from the past. He was benefited to direct several state infrastructure projects. He was appointed Computer Attorney General on both elections from the 17 and 19, and it's the leader of the propaganda ring on social networks, the Lord of the Trolls. This is not as something I can say lightly. This is something that was published by Perfil newspaper. Who is the teacher of the K-Trolls? Ariel Garbars teaches how to fabricate trends on Twitter and WhatsApp, the cultural battle against Macri supporters. This is the structure, the final structure of this propaganda apparatus. You can have a leader, coordinators, which names are not disclosed by me, but if you want to read the Perfil newspaper, you can easily find it and translate it with Google. Perfil decided to publish their names too. I prefer to only disclose the leaders one. They send the hashtags or instructions to WhatsApp groups and Twitter groups, and then the trolls, which names are also not disclosed, try to replicate it and make something like an infodemic. Okay, now a good question is this illegal? Sorry. In Twitter, it is against the terms of service, and their safety team actively hunts these state-linked propaganda groups. And they, for example, had a lot of tracking operations against China users groups. In our country, this is not illegal, and in fact, it looks suspiciously endorsed. So what tools were used for this part? Trendinalia, Trends24in, Botometer, which is a pretty awesome tool for detecting fake profiles, GetDayTrends, the Twitter API, Twitter Ruby Gem, and my own tool that will be published on GitHub, Venator Lua, which I use it to give a score to user based on certain behaviors in order to see if it is a bot, a troll, or not. So what are they doing actually right now? Well, this last day they were generating hashtags supporting the use of the government application, you know, the one we will see on the next part. Surveillance. ARGOP coronavirus APK, or as is most widely known, Cuidar COVID-19, it's a tracking application proposed by the Argentine Ministry of Modernization. Globant was the lowest bidder, and that converted it into the awarded contractor for building it. It was attempting to be made mandatory by law. So if you wanted to leave your home, even for buying supplies, food, wherever, if you wanted to cross your doorstep, you must have this application installed on your own private cell phone. So obviously, this presented a lot of resistance from citizenship, and they back it down on this. The current version is 3.31, but I have happened to analyze only the 102, 307, and the 3.3. I haven't tested the latest patch. Some of the tools I have used are JAX, APK tool, and Decompile Android, which is a pretty good online decompiler for Android applications. The first thing I did was to try to review it just manually. And at first glance, I noticed a lot of broken functions, things that didn't work at all, functions that didn't return anything. It was like totally broken and totally clunky. Then I tried to review the code and see if I can find some lead of why it was working so badly. I found a lot of dyslexic-like errors. For example, here, deshabilidad instead of deshabilitar, a word totally badly written. In English, this is disable. Again, bonotes instead of botones, which in Spanish means buttons. And I say, okay, maybe my decompiler screwed it up, so I try with another. And now this behavior was repeated. So a lot of functions were actually doing nothing. Again, a lot of different things and components had the same fate as the one we saw before. For example, here, numer instead of numero, number in English. Masculio instead of masculino, which is male in English. And this explained a lot of things. The auto-evaluation feature, it's a critical feature of this app, of this application, which allows the user to set its symptoms and get an auto-evaluation. Well, it wasn't working at all. After reviewing the code, I found that it was written in this manner, evalua coin instead of auto-evaluation, right? So this explains why it wasn't working. Then you may say, okay, but if you call to an undefined function, your compiler must at least tell you, hey, you can't compile this, go and fix it. And I say, okay, that's right. You can call a function that doesn't exist. Well, the original auto-evaluation function exists, but it's empty. So it is like someone just added it in order to make the compiler to stop complying, to stop ranting about it. And after digging a little bit further, I found a new relic write-only token, which is not a vulnerability, but it will become handy later. Just remember this part. There were insecure JSON structure creation everywhere, a lot of times. So instead of using a JSON object, a JSON builder, they used this kind of horror you're seeing here. It's obviously totally vulnerable to injection or manipulation. And there were references to a long dead product, Google+. It seems like a framework or a library aided it by default on a lot of places again. Then I happened to analyze this code with BCG, Vulnerable Core Grepper, Code Warrior, and some other tools. And they found all of them agree on a lot of insecure and unsanitized execute calls, as you may see here. Really lots of them. Even some of them could lead to SQL injection because they are trying to construct SQL queries from unsanitized input. This application also communicates with foreign servers, as you may see here. Just for clarification, the scanner I've used was hosted in China, so you might be safe to ignore the first result. These servers are not pretty much safe for storing, well, anything. I've scanned them with many tools. One of the most comprehensive I found was OniWeb. I trust only open tools, no sin, and to do not engage in any offensive activity. This is the map of all servers identified, and all inherit the same qualification. The final grade is C. It is not PCI compliant, it's not GDP compliant, and it's not compliant life itself. A lot of missing configurations, no well-organized firewall, everything is exposed without any single security header. And Sandroid, which is one of the biggest tools for scanning Android applications, qualifies it as risky, with a risk overall score of 61 on 100. There were many operations that caught my eye that were happening on base 64. As you might all know, the 64 is reversible. So when reversing it, when decoding it, I found that this application recorded a lot of interesting things. The device ID, and as you might see, the model and the device manufacturer. In this case, since I used a virtual Android device, it was able to catch any interesting data. And from the very first version, they tried to introduce the possibility of permanently tracking the user. As you might see, permiso beyond means access location permission, and todo el tiempo means all the time. We will see this repeated all along the code, so it is not something that was an error or something they were hoping to introduce in the following version. It's something that was planned from the start. The application has forced updates that try to run a startup. For example, mostrar diálogo de actualizar forzado means show forced update dialog, and arranque de dispositivo means device startup or device on boot or the like. Also, Sandroid found that this application has receivers hooked up to the boot event on the device. For example, it's looking for boot completed and quick boot power on events. This application tracks and asks for medical history. For example, as you can see here, antecedentes means, how to say it? It's previous diseases you have. Cancer, diabetes, pregnancy, cardiac, hepatic, renal, or respiratory diseases. And all this data, don't forget that it's sent abroad to an USA server. Auto-evaluations are not stored client-side, but rather they are sent to this abroad server. This means send auto-evaluation results. So if you happen to make the auto-evaluation feature that didn't work before, remember, all the results, even if you're just trying and not being serious, are going to be sent. The user's location, along with his or her DNI, which is the National Document ID, as I told you before, it's like the social security number, are sent to this remote server along with your location. So send location and user.dni is our national ID. And if the user, this is something pretty creepy, I want you to see. If the user evaluation returns that he or she is infected, the tracking service is activated in the foreground. For example, as you might see, todo el tiempo, as you may remember, it's all the time. It's one of the tracking settings. So if you have the all the time switched on, the tracking service, servicio de rastreo in this code, will launch a foreground service, a background service. And as you might see, it checks if nombre estado infectado is true, which is status name infected. So if you're infected, against your will, the application will try to reach its home base. By default, this application allows the backup mode, which obviously backups the data slice, data partition, along with the application to Google Drive. So basically you're sending your private medical information to Google. Also, as we might all know already, it is unreliable for an application to diagnose you with a condition or a disease. It's even less reliable for an application to say, okay, you're not contagious, boys. I know there's a pandemic and there's a highly contagious virus out there, but you're okay, you're not contagious. Yeah, sure, you're not contagious, don't worry. Here, no sos contagioso means in English, you are not contagious. It's one of the status. We all know what happened when you ask Google, for example, for medical information, or when you say, okay, I have a leg cramp, I think I hurt my arm, my head is dizzy. You ask something to Google and he obviously say, you're going to die. That's all. So it is not reliable for an application to replace a doctor. Look at this. This is a list of status for the user. No infectado means not infected. How on earth can an application tell you you're not infected? No contagioso means not contagious, which is worst. How can you assure a person that he isn't contagious for his family or for some other people? Just by diagnosing it with a cell phone. And especially with an application written with all these horrors inside. This is not the first time at all that we are featured, that we are famous on the internet. As you might see from the previous section, we were famous for censorship and the like. And now a lot of people are roasting Argentine developers because of this. For example, on Programming Horrors of Reddit, this is one of the posts, but there are a lot of them. They are mocking the way this code is written. As you might check on this giant if condition, this might at least catch your eye that something is wrong, right? Also, a lot of bigger governments, more developed governments, are dropping of their centralized coronavirus solutions, and we are still trying to enforce ours. And to close this chapter, this application was launched without publishing an audit, a pen test report, or anything related to that. This isn't even HIPAA compliant, and we are using medical information. We are sending it abroad. As we might have seen before, its servers do not have the best security qualification, and its components do not have the best quality, the source code especially, right? This is something really serious matter. Now ask yourself, what will happen if you develop this application and you have to present it for your employer? What will he or she say? Just think about it. So here are my conclusions, and I'll jump into Discord for question and answer if you would like to ask me something. Although it might seem obvious for us, tech people, always inform yourself through professional, neutral, and/or verified sources. They are not easy to get, I know, but most of people still fall for classic propaganda interventions. Say, okay, if 10,000 people, 10,000 people are talking about this, then it must be right. Just because a term or phrase is trending, it does not mean that it's real or represents the thinking of a majority, or even, that if a lot of persons or if a lot of people are talking about something, it automatically doesn't make it real. Every day, somewhere and at all times, there are groups of peoples and machines that are designed to install this agenda, these biased thoughts, these debates in society. Do not fall for them. The surveillance and monitoring of citizens is not the answer. This is my opinion, right? Particularly in the hands of governments like ours that constantly have tried to control social media and the citizenship thoughts. Investing thousands in technology after neglecting the health infrastructure, it's not the solution either. An expensive app does not replace a good doctor. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Telegram, like Doctor, on GitHub, Mauro Eldritch, and I'm now going to make public the repository. I just uploaded it last night, so I didn't have time to publish it. It is github.com, Mauro Eldritch-COVID-1984. And my Twitter account is Mauro Eldritch. Feel free to follow me, and if you want to ask me something, do not worry. I'm going to jump into the Discord server for questions. Just give me 5 minutes. And I hope you have liked my talk. And obviously, feel free to clone the repo and to see for yourself. I have uploaded, along with these slides and all the material, the white paper explaining completely in depth the introduction into the propaganda apparatus, and the decompiled source code and the APK binaries. So if anyone is interested in reversing them, feel free to do it. Don't worry. I hope you have liked it and have a nice day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and great presentation, Mauro. And once again, thank you for supporting the community and the DEF CON Red Team Village, as well as the Texas Cyber Summit. And for all the attendees, feel free to join the conversation at our Discord servers. You will find the links at the event website, which is actually in the bottom of your screen. And we will go on a break, but if you have any questions for Mauro, please go to the Discord server, and I'll talk to you in about 15 minutes. Thank you.